Welcome back to Touring the AFC South. I am your host, Mike Patton, and want to take a trip down south to Jacksonville, talk a little bit of Jacksonville Jaguars football, the excitement to start the year, and now it's kind of tailed off and not necessarily where everyone thought it may have been to start the year. I wanted to bring in someone that has been and had a front row seat to all of it this year. Demetrius Harvey of Jacksonville.com, of course, and Florida Times Union. How you doing, man?
I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there. I'm hanging in there. Now, of course, the news just dropped that the Titans are firing their general manager, John Robinson, today, which,
Mm-hmm.
I talked about it, but I want to get your thoughts on that firing. Did it catch you off guard today?
It probably caught me off guard only because I haven't been following it too closely, but it
Mhm.
doesn't surprise me. The Titans, they've been underperforming this year. Obviously the last loss was sort of an indictment on what he's sort of built around Derrick Henry. Ryan Tannehill. I think that it's also a consequence of what we saw from AJ Brown the other night or the other day. I forget which time they played, but it he's him having a big game, and then you see what they got as a return. It just doesn't make sense. They probably should have extended him. They didn't, and so I think that ownership clearly doesn't have as long of a leash on their GM position as maybe the Jaguars do. So once they saw the trend that it's heading down, while the Titans might be in first place, they're sort of lucky that they're in a division with three teams that are a few of the worst in the league right now.
Yeah, I hear you there. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, when you get a chance, go back and listen to what I talked about in the beginning. But we'll talk about that a little later. Of course, we do have to talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, and of course, I do have to talk about this loss, 40-14 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know DJ Tark had to be very, very happy to see the end result that he saw, being that he plays for the Detroit Lions now. So, Goff threw for 340 yards. Of course, DJ Chark got 98 of those yards receiving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm in Ross St. Brown, 2 touchdowns, 11 receptions. I mean, what happened to the pass defense of that game?
Yeah, I mean it's sort of been. I think that this is just the first game that we've sort of seen a team take advantage of what the Jaguars have been able to put out there as far as their secondary goes. Shaq Griffin went down early week, I believe it was week 6, maybe, somewhere around there, and then he went on IR. He wasn't performing very well the past few games before that anyway. But since then, the Jaguars have been sort of rotating that second corner position. They've been using guys like Trey Herndon, who's now been inactive, like a healthy scratch the past 2 games. Tavon Campbell, who, I mean, most people don't even know who he is. He was from the Chargers, and they claimed him off waivers, and now he's playing. They also played Chris Claybrooks, and then they played the rookie Buster Brown. So there's just been a lot of dysfunction at that corner position, but also just in general, the Jaguars' pass defense hasn't been very good. They've been allowing the quarterback to sort of sit there, and you saw that with Jared Goff. He had a lot of time. They haven't been able to rush the passer at all with Trayvon Walker, with Josh Allen, with the guys on the interior. It just hasn't been good. They've been kind of messing around with that second linebacker spot. Devin Lloyd was starting, and now he's not. Chad Muma's in there. So it was just a consequence of a lot of different things that sort of was boiling and finally just rose to the top. Uh, Andre Siska was out, with a shoulder injury. So there's a bunch of little things that that sort of culminated into what we saw on Saturday or on Sunday. The Lions just were the better team. I think that we knew that the Lions had a pretty good offense. They could pass the ball, they can run the ball. They opted to pass, and they did it well.
Yeah, definitely. And you touched on something, the pass rush.
Mhm.
Now, before the season, I was very high on the combination of Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker.
Yeah.
Now, looking at it, they really haven't produced. Now, is it a product of the actual defense they're running, or is it just them in general not producing?
So it's probably twofold. It's never always going to be one reason. You can always find little things that are wrong. But for this specifically, Josh Allen is a guy who came into this year, you're thinking, all right, you finally have a guy opposite of you that's going to be able to perform. So it's going to free you up and allow you to not only get pressures, which, I mean, he's one of the league's leaders in pressures this year, which is surprising. But I think it's just a product of how they determine what a pressure is within a couple yards of the quarterback before they, launch the ball, or timing wise, where he was on the play. There's no question that Josh Allen is a high effort player. He gives it his all every single snap. I think that's part of the reason why he's still in there, and they haven't just completely benched him. But right now, he's just not finishing. He had a clear shot at Jared Goff on Sunday, and he wasn't able to bring him down. He missed him, like just literally missed him. Jared Goff runs off, and Goff isn't a runner. He's not going to be able to get out of anything. He barely got like 2 yards, I think, and then all of a sudden, I think he only got 2 yards out of that play in general, and I don't think they got the first down. So it was just a bunch of things that have caused Josh to sort of slow down. And I think another thing, Trayvon Walker, in my opinion, coming in, he wasn't a guy who was going to be able to get after the quarterback consistently. We knew that it was going to be sort of a project year for him. He had never played that sort of outside linebacker, go get him kind of position, and it's kind of showed all season. I think he only has maybe 1.5, maybe 2 sacks this season, and that's not surprising. But another thing is they are sort of running this scheme without having the right players for it. So Trayvon Walker seems to be better suited inside. Just, if you look at his tape at Georgia, him rushing from the inside was a lot better than him rushing just as an outside player. If you look at what he's been able to do when they do put him inside with the Jaguars, it seems to be a lot better. Right now, he only has a bull rush move, and it's just a thing where you would think that they would sort of reflect that, where they would fix it, but they just haven't. So I think it's just a couple of issues, not only with the scheme, but also with the players. They haven't been able to finish. They haven't been able to do the things that they need to do, but also no one has. So if no one's able to get pressure, then clearly something's wrong inherently with the scheme. There's got to be an issue. It's not just on the players.
Well, I hear you there.
Yeah.
Definitely something that's going to be looked at more than likely this offseason. We'll definitely see some changes happen.
There's got to
Now,
be. Yeah.
Now, I do want to go over to the offensive side of the ball, and there was a big scare for the Jacksonville Jaguars, which Trevor Lawrence going down with an injury. Now, he limped back out to the field, and I believe he played the whole second half or most of it.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, he played.
On him?
The only update we have is it's not a knee injury. It's more of a foot/toe issue. He was set to go get MRIs done either yesterday or today. I'm sure the coaching staff already knows the prognosis of that, like if it's something that's going to keep him out this week. Doug Peterson seemed to be optimistic, but just to kind of go back to the injury a bit, when it happened, I was in the press box in Detroit, and me and a few other Jaguars writers and reporters were sitting next to each other. We just looked at each other like, I cannot believe this is happening. Even though we're not necessarily fans of the team, to cover a team that has, we've invested our time in every day, each and every day, and we're talking with Trevor, you get closer to the players. So it's just like, wow, I can't believe that this is going to happen right now, because it looked like, a devastating knee injury. Torn ACL, anything that you would say that's going to keep him out for the rest of the year, maybe even beyond, because of just how he went down. He was down on the ground for so long. He was holding his knee. You could see, he was holding the back of his knee, which, that's never good, but it turned out to be good. It turned out to be not too bad. He was able to come in. Some people were kind of surprised that he was back in it because they were already down by so much, even going into halftime. But when you look at it, if it's not an injury that's going to get worse by playing, and he's your best shot at winning the game, which was basically a playoff game for Jacksonville, you have to put him back in. So, he was able to go back in there. He ran. Maybe some adrenaline was running through his veins, but, he was able to do it. So I think that It's probably not going to be too bad, but we'll never really know until the MRI comes back. How sore is he? How is he able to plant? All those good things.
Gotcha. Okay, and what can I say? What were the lines? I know the lines have struggled early on defensively, but they've gotten a little
Mm-hmm.
better defensively as the season's gone on. And kudos to Aaron Glenn, former NFL cornerback,
Mm-hmm.
getting things done with that defense. So, what were they doing defensively to frustrate the Jaguars' offense?
I don't even know if it was necessarily what the Lions were doing because you got to think the second play of the game, the Jaguars fumble, and it was on a pretty good 13-yard carry by Travis Etienne. That sort of set them back. It was 7-0 early. And then the next drive, they had a drop ball within the 5, which could have been a touchdown. It was definitely going to be a first down. They had to settle for a field goal. So, all of a sudden, the Lions go down and score again. It's 14-3. Then the Jaguars, I think, try to battle back. They probably ended up punting. I don't remember exactly what happened drive to drive, but it sort of got away from them. I think that's the best way to describe it. It wasn't that the Lions were playing exceptionally well or anything. It was just that they kept scoring. So every single drive that the Lions had, and I don't count the last drive, the 9th drive, as anything because it was just them taking knees. But they scored on all 8 of their drives, 4 touchdowns, 4 field goals. That's tough to match. I mean, for any team, especially one that had at least 5 drops on Sunday, it wasn't necessarily something that the Lions were doing. They weren't blitzing more. That Trevor didn't look bad, and he actually made a couple of amazing throws during the game, especially early on. So it was mostly a product of the Jaguars sort of making mistakes. Those third down drops, you can't have them. Those drops in general, you can't have them. They're drive killers. So kudos to the Lions. I don't want to take away anything from them because they are playing a little bit better than they have been in the past, but I really do think that the Jaguars' offense more hurt themselves than anything. The Lions' offense now, that's actually a pretty good offense, and then they have the pieces in place to get things going.
Yeah, and imagine how tough they're going to be when they get their first round wide receiver back next year. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Now, now looking at it, of course, we're gonna leave the Lions game. That's the past. We're gonna talk about what's coming up next, and that's a matchup with the Tennessee Titans. Of course, Tennessee Titans, like you mentioned, lost to the Philadelphia Eagles, and it did not look very good. So, what do you think, based off of what you've kind of seen in terms of AJ Brown having his way with the cornerbacks? What do you think is going to be the game plan offensively, or should be in the game plan offensively for the Jaguars coming into this game?
Yeah, there should be another game where Doug Peterson loves to pass the football. That should be the game plan against the Titans. I know that their run defense is, if I remember correctly, pretty solid. I don't know necessarily if it's good, but I know that they're a feisty bunch. They can make anything out of anybody. They have guys that are coming off of having 0 sacks, and then all of a sudden they get to Tennessee and they have 4 on the year or however many. But it's a game that's going to be physical. I think that the Jaguars have been out physicaled already this season, and I think it's shown that can be the case. You also have to remember, on Sunday it will have been 3,318 days since the Jaguars last beat the Titans in Nashville. I don't know where you were in 2013, but I was in my second year of college, and I don't really remember exactly where I was when the Jaguars were able to defeat the Titans in Nashville. So it's one of those things where it's hard to even say that the Jaguars have a chance because for 9 years they haven't done it, and it's been different teams. It doesn't matter what team comes in there. Doesn't matter who's coaching the Titans at the time. Doesn't matter who's coaching the Jaguars at the time. It's been 3 different coaches, 4 different coaches probably, and still we're getting the same results. But anyway, I just think that for the Jaguars to have success, they have to rely on guys like Christian Kirk. They have to rely on guys like Zay Jones, even though he had a poor game against the Lions. They have to be able to pass the football, and they have to be able to move the ball, down the field slowly. They can't allow these these drives to get out of hand. Excuse me, to get out of hand. They need to be able to not punt the football as much as they have been. It just has to be more clean.
Gotcha. Definitely understand that. I mean, passing the football would definitely be something I would think about doing too, especially with the way the corners of the Titans have been taken advantage of a lot this season. Another thing I want to throw out there too, Derrick Henry, it hasn't been the greatest stretch of running the ball for him. Now, I will say it's not all on Derrick Henry. You know, some of that scheme, some of that is just individual players and line change-ups. But in the last 4 games, he has not gotten over 100 yards. And he had probably one of his poorest performances on Sunday because the Eagles were just not giving up anything. So with the history of Derrick Henry against the Jacksonville Jaguars, do you think this is the get-right game for Derrick Henry in that offensive line?
Could be. You know, obviously Derek has had a great time against the Jaguars, especially at home. You know, there's been a couple games where he's only had like 50 yards, something like that. But you know, he's usually performed well against Jacksonville. I think he has maybe I can't even tell you, maybe like 10 touchdowns against Jacksonville if I'm reading it right. You know, probably more. He's had 200-yard performances. He's had 150 plus yard performances. If there's any game that he's going to get right, it probably would be this one. Now, I will say the Jaguars' run defense is better than their pass defense. So if there's one little matchup that's actually going to work well for Jacksonville, it's going to be that one. I know Derrick Henry hasn't really rushed over, I think, even 40 yards over the past couple games. I don't know if that's necessarily a product of, you know, what the Titans are doing. I haven't necessarily been watching them, you know, on a week-to-week basis. But I know that they lost their left tackle early in the season. That can never help. I know that there's like a bunch of problems because of the passing game. It just isn't there. Ryan Tannehill is sort of regressing. You know, you traded away A.J. Brown. Things like that kind of stack up against you. And when you have a guy who, in my opinion, you know, the running back position is one of the ones that just all of a sudden fall off a cliff. Not to say that Derrick Henry's doing that this year, but, you know, it could be coming sooner rather than later. So if there's one game that he's going to have a bounce back, it would be this one. But I'm not sure exactly what the game plan will be. If it's going to be just run down the middle with Derrick Henry, then the Titans might not be able to match up pretty well with the Jaguars, because I think that all the Jaguars are going to be thinking about this week is stopping him.
Yeah, that's been the game plan for a lot of teams, definitely in the last 4 games. And, you know, to speak to the point about Tannehill regressing, I wouldn't say necessarily regressing. I would say the protection has gotten a little bit shaky as well. So, you know, they kind of have a combination of both. And, you know, but going on to the defensive side of the ball for the Titans, or excuse me, for the Jaguars, let me get it correct. What do you think? The Titans are a pretty strong group against the run. And of course, you know, they can be had against the pass, and, you know, those different things. What do you think their game plan is going to be there?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see. Are you talking the Jaguars defense?
The Jaguars. I mean, the Jaguars offense against the
Jaguars offense. Oh, okay, yeah.
My apologies.
The Jaguars. No, you're good. You're good. The Jaguars offense, I mean, they want to be able to, you know, Doug Peterson says it's all the time, throw to score, run to win. So they want to be able to throw the football. The problem comes up when they have drops and then the drive stalls, and then all of a sudden they find themselves behind like they did last week. You have to be able to not only throw to score, but you actually have to get the points at the end of the drive. So I think that's been the biggest issue, is that, you know, while they have a pretty solid game plan on a week in and week out basis, it kind of gets away from them once, you know, the defense allows the other team to score. You know, then all of a sudden they have no running game because they're not able to run the football because they need to hurry up and score to win. But then also once they have no running game, then teams sort of back off, and then all of a sudden the passing game suffers because of it. You also have to remember too the Jaguars wide receivers. While Christian Kirk has had a fantastic season, I think that he's been well worth them investing money into. You can argue all the time about how much money he should have gotten, but it was worth it for them to actually bring him in regardless. Zay Jones just has had an up and down season. The week before he had 11 catches, 145 yards. He had that 2-point conversion. It looked like he was the star of the show. Marvin Jones has shown an ability to catch those 50-50 balls. When Trevor needs a guy on 4th and 5, he's going to throw it to Marvin. But that hasn't been consistent. And then also the tight ends, they haven't been able to actually get Evan Ingram going. They don't really use Dan Arnold at all. So against the Titans, it's going to be interesting because if the Titans' game plan is to run the football all the time, I think that the Jaguars are going to be able to sort of utilize Travis Etienne a bit more. They're going to be able to run the ball a little bit more. It might be one of those slugfest sort of games. I don't know what the weather's going to look like. I know it will be kind of chilly because that's just how it is in Nashville in December. So I imagine they're going to try to come out early, throw the football, try to score fast. But as the game gets going and you see how the Titans respond with their running game and things of that nature, I can definitely see the Jaguars starting to sort of slow it down a little bit, give Travis the ball. And if that's starting to be successful, then, all of a sudden the Jaguars have a pretty good shot of winning.
All right. And then one more I want to ask you about this game. The Titans front four, they haven't really got pressure like they normally would. They are missing Danico Autry. There's no clear-cut reason in terms of there's no clear-cut decision, I should say, whether he's going to play this week or not. Still early in the week, in the football week, I should say. But their front four definitely brings a lot of pressure versus the Jaguars' offensive line. Mm-hmm. Is there definitely cause for concern for you with that offensive line versus this defensive line?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you have Jeffrey Simmons. That's one of the best defensive tackles I've ever seen in the past several seasons. Him, Aaron Donald. Those are a couple of guys. Not to say that Jeffrey Simmons is Aaron Donald, just because no one is. But Jeffrey Simmons is one of those guys who's going to get pressure early. You have a rookie center in there, and Luke Fortner, who's given up some pressures to defensive tackles this year. He hasn't been perfectly consistent. He's had some down days for sure. So it's definitely a concern. It's one of the major concerns this week. I think is going to be protection against that. Mike Vrabel defense, which is very fast. They don't have a problem with blitzing. It seems like they're swarming around the ball. They cause chaos at the line of scrimmage. They sort of compress within that interior. I think that they know the weak points of an offensive line, and they're going to attack it. So yeah, there's plenty of concern. I think Jeffrey Simmons is going to be having a field day at times. He's going to look pretty good. I don't know if is Bud Dupree out for the season? I don't remember if he.
No. Bud's played the last couple games.
He's good. Okay, yeah. So Bud Dupree, he's another guy. I know that he hasn't had the career that many thought he would, but he's had sort of a resurgence of late. I'm not going to say he's amazing or anything, but he's a guy that can get after the passer. There's no question about it. So it's gonna be tough. I know that the Titans defense isn't exactly how it has been over the past couple of years, but because that Jaguars interior has struggled somewhat, I think that this is going to be a pretty good test for them.
Yeah, we'll definitely see for sure. Now, one other question I do want to ask you: what is one positive that you've seen out of this Jacksonville Jaguars team this season, and one negative that you've seen over this team that's kind of lingered on from last year?
Yeah, so the one positive, and I think this is the reason why there should be hope in Jacksonville, or if you're just an observer of the team, why you should not think that this team is going to be bad forever, is that they truly believe in Doug Peterson. They for the time that I've covered the team, which is basically from the end of 2018, kind of definitely in 2019, and then throughout. They haven't had this much faith in a coaching staff, in my opinion, just from talking to the guys, seeing how they respond. They seem to be very united on things, even after Sunday's loss. everyone used the same term, embarrassing. You can tell that that was something that Doug Peterson said probably a lot in his post-game speech. That was embarrassing. Because that they sort of mimic what he's done. Throughout the whole season, they've had a 5-game losing streak throughout it, and still every single week they were the same. There was no change. It wasn't like they were defeated. They weren't disappointed. Now we'll see how they reacted to the Lions loss this week in the locker room, but from what I've seen, they've been very even keeled, and that's a reflection of the head coach. So I think that they have the head coach. I think that he's a great play caller. I think that he's gotten Trevor Lawrence to the point where he's actually going up instead of just going, straight ahead or down like he was last year. So that's a great thing. The one negative, I don't know if it's necessarily a carryover from last season, but the only carryover from last season would just be the roster in general. I think that there's a lot of things that need to be cleaned up. I think that signing a guy like Shaq Griffin was a mistake last year. I mean, it just has proven to be so. He hasn't been performing to what you would expect given his contract. Signing a guy like Roy Robertson Harris, same thing. And that's not a knock on those guys. They could just be in the wrong scheme. It just doesn't work out. Sometimes that happens, but they haven't been performing. So, there's players that are on the team right now that are making it so that they're basically set back, especially defensively. So the one area of concern that's probably moving forward too is just is the defensive coordinator the right one for the job? Mike Caldwell, it doesn't seem like he either doesn't have the pieces or he doesn't know how to adjust with the pieces he has, and they have to quickly figure that out so they know if they need to move on or if they need to clean house in terms of the personnel. So I think that right now, belief in Doug, belief in themselves, I think that's great. It's trending in the right direction. The defense, in terms of how that's performing, is trending in the wrong direction.
Gotcha. Well, thank you for answering my questions about the Jacksonville Jaguars, and I'm definitely interested to see how this matchup goes. Hopefully, for Jacksonville Jaguars fans, we don't see any defensive backs flying like with that Derrick Henry stiff arm or anything of that nature. But like I end every show, there's 5 questions, there's 2 answers, there's 1 choice. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Hasty or Henderson, which one do you think is more effective the last 4 games as a backup to ETN?
Well, Hasty. I mean, Henderson hasn't really played, so Hasty's the guy for right now. I think if you look at the Jaguar backups, I would say none of them have been effective. It doesn't really matter who's in there. It's only been Travis Etienne.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think he'll get 1,000 yards, and hopefully he can stay healthy. Good gracious. Yeah. Foot injuries, man. As far as the Jaguars, 7 wins, yes or no?
Oof, no. I'm just gonna say no. I don't think they're gonna be able to get. They're gonna need 3 more. I don't really see 3 more on the schedule. They would have to beat the Titans at least one time. I don't think they've got it.
Gotcha. Who's the better Jones? Who's been the better Jones to you this year? Marvin or Zay?
It's actually a tougher question than you would think, because Zay has the better stats, but Marvin's been more clutch. I would say Zay, only because he has been able to perform more consistently. He's been in the game plan more. They believe in him more, and he has made some clutch plays as well. Marvin's been very, very reliable though throughout the year, and more reliable than I thought he would be.
Now, I will say that if you did pick Zay, that means that you got the glow, sir. You know what that joke is from?
I don't know what that joke is from.
Oh, my goodness. Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon, because when he saw his first press conference, I thought he looked like Bruce Leroy in the press conference. So.
I was actually the one who took that picture, and it went viral. It was so funny, the story about it. So I take the picture, and I just tweet out a quote on what Zay said, because I was like, oh, this is what the new wide receiver is saying. And I didn't realize that it's like, I noticed his hair looked weird, but I didn't realize that it would be that funny to people. And people just took off with it. They were going, my mentions were going crazy. I was just getting a laugh out of it. I felt bad for Zay. I'm like, man, I know that was just hat hair. But it was a funny time.
Yeah, immediately when I saw the picture, the first thing I started doing was thinking of Bruce Leroy and Barry Gordy's Last Dragon immediately. All right. Now, Josh Allen or Trayvon Walker, who has more sacks in the season?
I mean, that
I know
one's
flip a
actually real.
coin. I know.
Yeah, it basically is. I'll say Josh just because he has more now. So I mean, I don't really anticipate Trayvon getting too many. I think Josh has been closer than Trayvon has been. I mean, it's tough. I mean, it's going to be like by a half a sack or one.
Now, I will say this: if it depends on who's lining up over Dennis Daly this week for the
Oh,
Titans,
really?
whoever lines up over there, if Dennis Daly is starting, that person may have a sack or two. To be honest,
What side is
pretty.
he on?
He's
He's
on the well. If you're facing, he's
mhm.
on the right side. If you're turn around on the left side,
Okay, so he's the left tackle. So that Trayvon's going to be over him then, unless they switch it around. Yeah. So
yeah, he might have a good game on Sunday potentially. I'm not trying to throw shade at Dennis Daly, but just
yeah,
calling it what it is.
it
He
is.
hasn't
It is what
been.
it is.
Yeah, he hasn't been great there.
Mm-hmm.
Last one for you. Better on the offensive line, Cam Robinson or Brandon Sheriff?
It's actually crazy, and I'll say it's Brandon just to get that out of the way. But it's actually crazy to think about because entering the year, I would have thought Brandon Sheriff would beat out Cam Robinson in this question by miles because Brandon Sheriff is a guy who's been an All Pro, perennial Pro Bowler, but he hasn't played bad. He's just been okay. He's been good, like but not to the level of which you would think. You're getting this guy who's going to be a Pro Bowler potentially. You thought maybe the knock would be injuries. He hasn't been hurt. He just hasn't played to that level, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, he might have went Jacksonville on you. I don't know.
Yeah, it is what I know. Honestly, you're right. I mean, it seems like free agents come into Jacksonville, even if they were good before. Now, I will say Foye has been pretty good, but yeah, free agents come in, and all of a sudden you're like, oh. So it is what it
All
is.
right. Well, thank you for chiming in and giving us your perspective on things in terms of the Jacksonville Jaguars. And the floor is yours. Tell everyone what you're working on, where they can find you on social media.
Absolutely. So first, you can find me on social media at Demetrius82. Um, it's pretty simple as that. But for as far as my content, Jacksonville.com. I think you might have to sign up in order to read all my stories, but there's ways around it. You guys know what to do. But just this week I'm working on, or actually already published it, a Tyler Shatley article. He was the Jaguars nominee for the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Really proud of the article. I spoke to every single one of his team or his offensive linemen. So all four other starters on the offensive line, I spoke to them about him and sort of what he's done in the community, in the locker room, things of that nature. I spoke to Trevor Lawrence one-on-one. That story's up. I have content coming out throughout the week. I'll have a preview on Sunday, so just stay tuned.
All right. Sounds like you got a lot going on, and we definitely have a
Mm-hmm.
lot going on over here at Touring the AFC South. There will be more content coming. You just have to stay tuned. Thank you all for tuning in to Touring the AFC South. We're out.